Have you ever looked at someone so quiet, so unnoticed, and wondered what they might be carrying behind their silence, in a small town wrapped in falling leaves and whispered traditions? Evelyn Moore arrived at work every day without fuss, no makeup, no stories, no signs of a past. But what if the person everyone overlooked was hiding more grace and heartbreak than anyone could imagine? When a burned-out CEO returns from the noise of New York to his hometown office, he doesn't expect to be moved not by numbers, not by people, certainly not by the quiet secretary no one seems to really see. But when he follows her one evening, what he discovers isn't a scandal. It's something far more unexpected. What would you do if the person you judged turned out to be the one person who had quietly saved everyone else? And what if your chance at redemption meant earning the trust of someone who trusts no one? This is a story about silence, second chances, and the kind of kindness that never asks to be noticed. If you've ever felt invisible or misjudged someone too soon, this story might just find a place in your heart. Evelyn Moore came to work every day at 8:58 sharp. She brought no noise, no perfume, no stories, just steadiness. Her shoes clicked softly on the tiled floor of Whitmore and Wells Consulting. Always the same rhythm. The building's heating system kicked on with a low hum as she entered, bringing with it the faint smell of old carpeting and morning coffee. Her desk sat neatly in the second row from the main entrance. Across from a half-dead plant, no one had watered in weeks. By 9:00 a.m. Bull, she had already logged in, reviewed the meeting schedule, and corrected 3 typos in a report she hadn't written. Ashwell, Vermont didn't wake up quickly in late October. It was a town of slow risers and slower habits. The air was already turning crisp, and storefronts along Maple Street had begun stringing lights and stacking decorative pumpkins. Outside the office window, leaves danced along the pavement, burnt orange and gold, caught in little gusts that made the town feel quieter than usual. Inside, people moved in and out of the kitchenette with half-hearted greetings. Evelyn nodded politely, never interrupting, never inserting herself. She restocked printer paper without being asked, fixed the jammed stapler for the second time this week, and made a fresh pot of decaf when she noticed it had been empty since 10:15 yesterday. Rumors had been circulating that something or someone was about to shake things up. "He's coming back," someone whispered near the break room yesterday. "You didn't hear it from me. But Grant Whitmore's done with New York." Evelyn didn't ask who said it first. She just made a mental note to polish the brass nameplate on the executive office door. It hadn't been touched in months. By noon, Evelyn wrapped a scarf around her neck and stepped out into the chill. Miller's Market was 3 blocks away, tucked between the town's only barber shop and the old post office that still smelled like paper and rain. She walked there like she always did, head slightly down, pace, steady. Her canvas shopping bag folded neatly under one arm. Inside the market, the warmth hit her like a gentle sigh. The wood floor creaked underfoot, and the scent of spiced cider lingered near the entrance. She picked up her usual 4 apples, a half-gallon of milk, and a small loaf of sunflower seed bread. She passed over the pastries without looking. She never bought anything she didn't plan to use. Clara Dean stood by the register, counting out change with fingers marked by age and stubbornness. Her gray curls were tucked beneath a knit cap, and her eyes narrowed when they landed on Evelyn. "You again?" Clara said, voice scratchy but not unkind. "Same list every week." Evelyn offered a small smile and nodded once. Clara didn't move. "You know, quiet people usually have the loudest pasts." There was no malice in her tone, but Evelyn felt the words land all the same. She paid in cash, thanked the young cashier quietly, and stepped back into the cold. The rest of the day passed without interruption, emails answered, calendar appointments rescheduled, a voice message typed out for Mason in accounting, who always forgot his own passwords. At 4:47, Evelyn stood from her desk, smoothing the wrinkles from her skirt. She collected her bag, checked the drawers, powered down her computer, and pushed in her chair, perfectly aligned, as always. As she passed the executive office, she hesitated. The door was still shut, the office beyond it dim, lit only by a faint line of sunlight leaking through the blinds. But something about it felt different, not dusty, not forgotten, just expectant. She lingered a moment longer than usual, her eyes tracing the shape of the chair, barely visible behind the frosted glass, her fingers curled around the strap of her bag. And then she turned away. Outside, the wind had picked up, sending a small flurry of leaves swirling past her boots. The sun was low now, casting long golden shadows across the pavement. Evelyn stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting her scarf, before glancing back at the building. Through the frosted front window, a black Lincoln sedan pulled up. She saw a man step out, and their reflections overlap on the glass. Grant Whitmore never planned to return, but stress changes, plans, and sometimes hearts. The sky over Ashwell was the color of wet cement when his car pulled up to the curb. Inside, staff had been buzzing since 7, darting from cubicle to kitchenette in hopes of perfection. Ties were straighter, blouses crisper. The office smelled more like lemon polish than usual, but still carried the undertone of burnt coffee no one had fixed. Evelyn sat at her desk, same as always, tapping quietly on her keyboard while everyone else churned the air around her. Grant stepped through the glass doors at 9:07 a.m., a sleek leather briefcase in one hand, a tailored charcoal coat draped over his arm. His presence stilled the hallway like a sudden winter gust. Conversations clipped off mid-sentence. Mason, the junior analyst, practically tripped over himself to greet him. "Mr. Whitmore, it's really good to see you back." "Sir." Grant offered a handshake, firm but distant, his smile tight. "Mason." "Right," Mason beamed. "Yes, sir." Grant's eyes swept the room. He nodded as people made small talk, offered coffee, pointed out the new furniture that had replaced the creaky chairs in the conference room. But he didn't sit. Instead, he began to walk, slow and methodical, like reacquainting himself with a place he'd once known, but didn't miss. The hallway carpeting was the same outdated pattern, but someone had vacuumed recently. A bulletin board now displayed wellness tips. He glanced toward the break room, where a few overly cheerful employees tried too hard to look busy. As he passed the second row of desks, something caught his eye: a workstation, neatly kept, not showy, just efficient. Post-its were aligned perfectly along the monitor. The keyboard had a piece of clear tape holding the left shift key in place. A small ceramic tray held 3 black paper clips, not 4. Grant paused, fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the desk. "Whose is this?" he asked, almost to himself. Mason, who had been trailing just a step behind, scoffed lightly. "Oh, that's Evelyn. Evelyn Moore. She's been here a while. Keeps things running, I guess. Real quiet type. Honestly, she's basically furniture." Grant said nothing. He didn't even look at Mason. His eyes lingered on the tidy desk, then flicked to the hallway where he caught a glimpse of a gray sweater turning the corner. The tour continued. He met with department heads, nodded at names he'd already forgotten, and ignored the untouched cup of coffee someone had thoughtfully placed on his desk. His shoulders ached. Tension wound tight from too many late nights and one too many silent drives. New York had burned him out, too loud. Too many dinners where nothing was said, but everything was implied. He hadn't come to Ashwell for peace, but maybe he had come for quiet. Around noon, Grant stepped out into the side hallway near the supply closet, trying to shake the buzzing in his head. That's when he saw her. Evelyn was kneeling next to the janitor's cart, one hand steadying the handle, the other adjusting a broken wheel with a screwdriver someone must have left behind. The janitor, a thin man with a hunched back and kind eyes, looked both embarrassed and grateful. No need to rush the repair order, Evelyn said softly. It's just the bolt. Easy fix. Thank you, the janitor replied. Most folks don't even notice. Evelyn smiled, quick and modest. I notice. She stood, wiped her hands on a handkerchief, and walked away without realizing anyone had been watching. Grant stood still for a moment, watching her disappear down the hall. He blinked, and when he turned back toward his office, his coffee was still sitting there, cold, untouched. Later that afternoon, Mason dropped off a file and lingered, clearly waiting for approval or praise. Grant flipped through the pages, then looked up. What's her name again? Who? Grant tilted his head, unimpressed. The woman with the organized desk. Oh, Evelyn, like I said. But Grant had already turned away, fingers resting lightly on his temple as he stared out the window. He hadn't meant to follow her, but something about the way she disappeared at 5 o'clock sharp felt like a mystery worth knowing. Every day for the past week, Grant had watched her leave the office with the same precision, coat buttoned, tote bag over one shoulder, head slightly down, but posture firm. No hesitation, no small talk, just gone. It was 5:03 p.m. Now, the rest of the office still buzzed faintly, people gathering coats. Mason, cracking another lame joke in the hallway, but Evelyn had already vanished into the dusky November chill. Grant didn't know why his feet led him toward the parking lot. He didn't have a plan. He only knew her car, the old Ford with one green bumper and a back window that didn't quite roll. All the way up was pulling onto Maple Street as he slid into the driver's seat of the black Lincoln his assistant had arranged earlier that morning. The engine purred as he pulled out behind her, careful not to tail too closely. The streets of Ashwell glowed with early holiday warmth. Shop fronts had begun stringing Thanksgiving lights, soft golds and rusty reds. Tiny plastic turkeys tucked beside window displays. Leaves twirled along the edges of the sidewalk, making every corner look like a painting. She turned left onto a narrow lane behind the old First Congregational Church. Grant hesitated, then followed. She parked behind a squat brick building with a faded wooden sign reading Ashwell Community Center. No one else seemed to be around. Evelyn stepped out, her canvas tote tucked under her arm, and walked up the cracked path toward the side entrance. The door opened before she knocked. An elderly woman wrapped in a burgundy cardigan greeted her with open arms. Grant pulled to the side and killed the engine. He didn't get out. Inside, through a pane of slightly smudged glass, he watched the woman, Rosa, he would later learn hug Evelyn with the kind of warmth that didn't belong in boardrooms. Evelyn's posture softened. She laughed, not a smirk or a polite chuckle, but a full laugh, quick and breathy, like it hadn't been let out in years. Evelyn walked further into the building, and Grant followed on foot, staying in the shadows beside the low brick wall. A side window, cracked slightly at the corner, gave him a view into what looked like a classroom. There were folding tables, mismatched chairs, and 5 older women seated with tablets, phones, and notebooks spread in front of them. At the front, Evelyn stood confidently, wearing a soft gray coat and the calmest smile he'd ever seen. "All right, let's try it again," she said gently. "Tap the blue icon. Yes, that one, and wait for the sound." One woman frowned at her iPad. It just says connecting. Evelyn moved beside her. That's perfect. Just give it a second. She crouched to eye level, her voice low and encouraging. You're doing great. A few moments passed. Then, suddenly, a young girl's face popped up on the screen, bright, giggling, waving wildly. Grandma. The girl squealed. The older woman gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Oh my goodness. Lily? Is that really you? Tears shimmered in her eyes. Evelyn placed a steady hand on her shoulder. See, she said softly, you're not too old for FaceTime. You just needed a teacher. The room burst into applause. Gentle and earnest, another woman wiped her eyes. Rosa passed out napkins from her purse. Grant stood completely still. A strange tightness settled in his chest. He wasn't sure how long he watched. 5 minutes. 10, maybe more. Evelyn floated from one student to the next, answering questions, adjusting devices, offering encouragement. She never checked the time, never hurried. She was fully present, as if this was the only world that existed, and it wasn't the Evelyn he thought he knew. Not the woman who refilled printer paper and slipped out at 5 without a word. This Evelyn beamed, teased, leaned in to whisper reassurance. She belonged here. As the women began packing up, Evelyn passed out small granola bars from her tote. One woman tried to decline. That's too much. Dear. Evelyn shook her head. It's just a little something. For energy until dinner. Rosa hugged her again before they left. You're our tech angel, she said, beaming. Grant stepped back into the shadows. He walked away slowly, unsettled. He hadn't expected her smile to linger in his chest. A quiet past doesn't stay quiet forever, not in a town like Ashwell. The envelope was there when Evelyn came home, sitting squarely on her doormat like it had been placed with precision. No name, no stamp, just thick cream-colored paper, sealed only by the weight of itself. The wind rustled the porch, railing as she bent to pick it up, her fingers hesitating just slightly before curling around the edges. Inside, the contents were simple and deeply unwelcome. Photocopies of financial statements, a ledger page, 2 clipped articles, yellowed at the corners. Her breath caught as she scanned the first page. The handwriting thin, sharp, circled one word, Whitford. She closed the envelope slowly, not tearing, not crumpling, just folding it back into itself like something sacred and dangerous. Her tote dropped beside the coat rack, untouched. She moved to the small kitchen counter, placed the envelope down, and lit the candle she always saved for nights like these, pine and cedar, comforting, distracting. The knock came 15 minutes later. Clara Dean, bundled in a wool coat 2 decades old and a scarf wound high to her chin, stood with a lopsided Tupperware container. I made too much stew, she said. Again, Evelyn offered a faint smile. You always say that, and it's always true. Clara stepped inside without waiting for the invitation, brushing off her boots on the doormat and looking around like someone checking for changes. Still no curtains, she muttered, or photos. I like the light, Evelyn replied. Moving to the kitchen, Clara placed the stew on the counter, then spotted the envelope. Her hand reached for it, uninvited. Don't, Evelyn said. A bit too fast. Clara paused, eyes narrowing. Old business, just something from the past. Evelyn picked it up and slid it into a drawer. The candle flickered nearby. Clara exhaled. You know, Evelyn, you can change your name, your job, even your haircut. But in Ashwell, people don't forget, especially not names like Whitford. Evelyn's shoulders tensed. I'm not looking to be remembered. Clara adjusted her scarf and flexed her fingers as if arthritis had suddenly claimed them. You can't outrun a name. Evelyn. Ashwell remembers everything. She left not long after, promising to bring over cornbread next time, though her tone made it sound more like a warning than a favor. At the office the next morning, Grant sat behind his desk, the blinds half closed against the silver sky. He was flipping through a stack of employee profiles, not because he had to, but because something about Evelyn Moore lingered in his thoughts more than he liked to admit. Her file was thin, too thin, basic information, a clean performance record, a typed resume, and one printout that made him pause, a tax form from years ago. The name in the corner read, Evelyn Whitford. He leaned back in his chair. The name was familiar in a way he couldn't quite place. He tapped the screen of his phone, opened a browser, typed in the letters, slow and deliberate Whitford scandal, but then he stopped. His thumb hovered over the search icon. Outside his window, Evelyn passed by. Her coat sleeves rolled just above her wrists, moving with that same quiet precision. He didn't press enter. It was just a conversation, small, polite, safe, but something had changed. The community center was unusually busy for a Wednesday. Folding chairs scraped across the tile floor, paper turkeys fluttered from windowsills, and the scent of cinnamon-sprinkled apple cider drifted from a slow cooker in the back room. Outside, the last traces of daylight sank behind the hills, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Grant hadn't expected to be here. He certainly hadn't expected to be carrying chairs with Evelyn Moore. She met him at the storage closet, sleeves rolled, a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. "You don't have to help," she said as he reached for a stack of chairs. "I'm already here," he replied, shrugging. "Besides, it's been a while since I lifted anything heavier than a spreadsheet." That earned a soft laugh. Not loud, not bold, but real, the kind that startled even her. They moved together with an easy rhythm, placing chairs into neat rows while Rosa directed from a corner table, her cane tapping for emphasis, put two more near the window. "Edna likes the sunlight, even at night," she called. Grant stole glances at Evelyn. There was something steady about the way she worked, how she folded into the moment without trying to lead it. No instructions, no small talk, just quiet contribution. Mason, who had come by to drop off a donation of canned cranberry sauce, leaned against the doorway and watched them for a moment before chuckling. "Careful, Mr. Whitmore. Quiet girls are usually hiding the worst secrets." The words hung in the air like static. Evelyn froze mid-step, her hands tightening slightly around the back of a chair. Grant turned sharply, his gaze cooling. "That's not funny," he said, voice low. Mason raised his hands. "Just a joke." Grant said nothing more. But Evelyn didn't speak again either, not until Mason left. Muttering to himself, she returned to the chairs like nothing had happened. But the softness had gone from her shoulders. After the setup was done, Rosa patted Evelyn's hand. Silence can mean comfort, or it can mean danger. You just have to listen differently. Evelyn gave her a small, grateful nod, and Rosa winked, as if she'd said more than anyone could unpack. Later that evening, the warming mug was quiet, lit by soft yellow sconces and the glint of pie tins behind the counter. A bell chimed gently as Evelyn pushed open the door. Her gray coat slightly damp from the mist outside. Grant was already there, seated near the window, sipping something warm from a ceramic mug. He stood when he saw her. "I ordered hot cider. I didn't know what you'd want." "That's perfect," she said, surprised. "Thank you." They sat across from each other, a slice of pumpkin pie between them, untouched. Frank Sinatra crooned from a small speaker above the doorway. his voice crackling with nostalgia. They talked not about work, not about town gossip, but about the little things. The way the leaves in Ashwell always seemed to linger longer than they should, how the streets glowed under holiday lights, even if it barely snowed before December. My mother was an artist, Grant said after a pause. She never sold a painting. Not one. Evelyn tilted her head. That doesn't mean she failed. He smiled faintly. Sometimes I wonder if she ever wanted to sell them. Maybe she wasn't trying to sell anything. Evelyn said softly. Maybe she just needed to feel real. Their eyes met. And for a moment, neither looked away. His hand inched slightly forward on the table, hers resting nearby. They didn't touch, but they didn't move either. When Evelyn finally rose to leave, Grant didn't follow. He just watched her go, the bell over the door singing gently in her wake. Back home, the porch light flickered softly as Evelyn stepped up the 3 wooden stairs. She reached for her keys and froze. A brown paper package sat against her door. No name, no return address, just like the envelope before it. She stared at it for a long time before unlocking the door and slipping inside. The package remained where it was, untouched. As the night closed in around her, some letters arrive late, others show up exactly when you wish they hadn't. The brown paper package sat under the kitchen light, its corners slightly bent from the ride home. Untouched since last night, Evelyn hadn't found the courage to open it. Not yet, but tonight, something in the wind had shifted. The tapping at her window wasn't just from the branches. It felt like a clock, ticking louder than usual. She slipped off her shoes, wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself, and walked to the counter. The fabric was old, pilled at the sleeves. The same cardigan she'd worn in her senior year of high school, the one she used to bury herself inside when the world felt too loud. It still did. Her fingers peeled the tape slowly, gently, as if rushing would summon something worse. Inside were 3 folded bank statements, a handwritten note, and a small photograph she hadn't seen in over a decade. The bank statements were in her name, Evelyn L. Whitford, her old name, the trust her father had opened in silence, a fund he never spoke of, never explained. She'd discovered it by accident after his death, money she hadn't asked for, but eventually accepted and used quietly, for textbooks, rent, then later, the community center's internet upgrades, the iPads for the seniors, Rosa's hip surgery fundraiser. Her hands shook slightly as she read the note. He left the damage. You'll clean it up. No signature. Just those 8 words. The photograph was of her at 17, standing in front of the old Whitford estate, smiling too brightly for someone whose home life was collapsing behind closed doors. Evelyn swallowed hard and closed the box. Her heartbeat thudded too close to her ears. 15 minutes later, she was at the community center. The kitchen was warm, smelling of rosemary and cornmeal. Rosa stood at the stove in her apron, humming something half forgotten. She turned when Evelyn stepped in. Didn't think I'd see you tonight, Rosa said, lifting the kettle. But I set out 2 mugs anyway. Evelyn offered a tired smile and sat at the table, her fingers laced together tightly in her lap. Tea? Rosa asked. Please. They sat in quiet for a few minutes, the steam curling gently between them. Evelyn watched it swirl, like memory made visible. I got something, she said finally. Rosa didn't speak, but her eyes told Evelyn to go on. From before, old accounts, money I didn't want. But I used it. For good. Rosa reached behind her and placed a warm slice of cornbread on a napkin. Still warm, she said, like your conscience. Evelyn stared at it, then gave a soft laugh, one wrapped in disbelief. I thought if I stayed small, stayed silent, it wouldn't matter. It always matters, Rosa said gently. But that doesn't mean you're wrong for trying. Later that night, Evelyn returned home. Her cardigan tugged close against the night's chill. She entered slowly, flicking on only the kitchen light. She placed the envelope and its contents in a shoebox, the kind that still smelled faintly of leather and dust, and carried it to her bedroom. She hesitated at the edge of the bed, then knelt and slid the box underneath. Outside, just beyond the street lamp's reach, a figure lingered in shadow. Inside, Evelyn stood in her doorway, sensing something but unable to name it. A knock startled her. Clara's voice floated through the wood, muffled but clear. "You got a minute? Rumors. Like autumn wind. Start as a whisper, but they can tear branches down." The air in Ashwell had shifted, not just the weather, though November's bite had finally set in, but the way people paused when Evelyn passed. At the post office, she noticed the woman at the next box whisper something after glancing her way. At the diner, she felt the weight of a stare too long from a man who used to refill her coffee without asking. She paid for her eggs and left the toast untouched. On Sunday morning, the church steps were lined with pumpkins and hand-cut turkeys taped to the stained glass windows. Children in sweaters played with leaves near the sidewalk, and Evelyn tried to hold on to the quiet joy of it, but behind her, she caught fragments of a conversation, her name, and then the word Whitford. She tightened the belt on her coat and kept walking, boots crunching over dry leaves that no one had bothered to sweep. Clara appeared that afternoon, knocking twice and letting herself in before Evelyn could answer. She wore the same wool coat and scarf, her eyes sharp but tired. "I'm not here to fight," Clara said as she set a small jar of peach preserves on the counter. "But I need to be honest with you." Evelyn didn't respond. She stirred her tea slowly, the spoon tapping gently against the ceramic. "I sent the bank statement," Clara continued, "to Grant. No note, no signature. Just wanted to see what kind of man he really is." The spoon stopped. Evelyn's hands clenched the rim of the mug. "You had no right," she whispered. Clara exhaled. "Maybe not. But if he runs now, at least you'll know. I never asked to be tested," Evelyn said quietly. "Not by you. Not by this town." Clara reached for her scarf. "Ashwell remembers everything." Evelyn. "But maybe Tipples." It's time someone forgot. She left before Evelyn could find a reply. Back at the office the next day, Mason passed the copier room and caught two coworkers muttering behind their coffee cups. He heard her name. Heard scandal paired with inheritance and cover-up. His jaw tightened. He stepped into the room and said, calmly but clearly, if Evelyn's past mattered, she wouldn't be the one keeping this place running. The room went quiet. One woman flushed. The other looked away. That afternoon, the whispering stopped, at least where he could hear it. By Tuesday evening, Evelyn walked past the glowing store windows on her way to the warming mug. The town was fully dressed for Thanksgiving now. Paper turkeys, orange bunting, little pumpkins balanced on windowsills. Jazz from the 50s played softly from the cafe radio. The smell of pumpkin spice and warm sugar clung to the door. She pushed it open and froze. Grant was already there, seated at the back booth, the soft light from the pendant above casting a warm glow on the table. An envelope sat in front of him, the same one Clara had described. He looked up when she entered and didn't look away. Not every heartbreak is loud. Some come in a whisper, under dim cafe lights. The warming mug had long since closed for the evening. But the bell over the door didn't chime when Evelyn entered. Grant had already spoken with the owner, asked for privacy, promised to lock up. Now, the two of them sat at the corner booth, the overhead pendant casting soft light across the wood-grain table between them. The envelope lay in the center, untouched. 2 cinnamon rolls rested on mismatched plates. Neither had been touched. Steam no longer rose from the mugs beside them. The silence wasn't sharp. It was steady, pressing, like a weight neither of them wanted to lift. Grant didn't move. Just looked at her with eyes that held more questions than accusations. Tell me everything. Evelyn took off her gloves slowly, revealing the frayed edge of her right thumb. She folded them, set them beside her cider, then finally met his eyes. My father died 10 years ago. She began. When I got the trust information, I didn't want it. I left it alone for months. I thought, if I ignored it, maybe it wouldn't follow me. Her voice didn't shake, but it carried a deep weariness. Grant said nothing, only nodded once. For her to continue, I opened it eventually. Curiosity, maybe, guilt. There was money, a lot, more than I'd ever seen. She took a breath. I didn't use it for myself, not a single thing. She paused, reaching for the envelope, unfolding it with care. These programs at the community center, the Wi-Fi upgrades, the tablets for the kids, the new freezer for the food pantry. They didn't come from donations. She tapped the documents. They came from him, from what he left behind. But I rewrote it, tried to make something useful out of it. Quietly, Grant leaned back, rubbing his hand over his mouth. You should have trusted me. Evelyn blinked. Her reply came soft, almost inaudible. I didn't know how. Outside, the wind rattled the cafe window slightly. A few stray leaves skittered past. Through the glass, Clara could be seen walking slowly across the opposite sidewalk, bundled tight in her scarf. She looked toward the cafe, paused but didn't enter. Inside, the quiet between them deepened. I wasn't trying to lie, Evelyn said. I just wanted to start somewhere clean, and I thought if I kept my head down long enough, no one would ask. Grant's gaze dropped to the table. His fingers traced the edge of the cinnamon roll plate absently, but someone always does. He murmured. Evelyn stood, reaching for her gloves. I'm sorry you found out this way. Is that it? He asked. Not angrily. Just tired. She hesitated, then gave a faint nod. For now. She turned toward the door, pausing only to slip on her coat and push the gloves into her pocket. The bell over the door remained silent as she left, swallowed by the cold. Grant didn't follow. He stayed seated long after she was gone, hands wrapped around the cold mug, eyes fixed on the envelope. Outside, it began to snow. Sometimes, love doesn't knock. It just sits quietly on the porch swing and waits. The community center buzzed with warmth. Despite the chill outside, folding chairs squeaked against the floor, and soft jazz filtered in from an old speaker near the doorway. Paper turkeys, clearly made by children, danced slightly on the window panes with each breeze that slipped through the worn seals. Grant stood near the front of the room, sleeves rolled, eyebrows furrowed in concentration. In front of him sat 5 women, each holding a tablet, and all of them visibly amused. No, no, dear. One of them, Mrs. Pennington chuckled. That's the weather app. We want the one with the video symbol. Grant squinted. They all look like tiny radios to me. The room erupted in kind laughter. Rosa leaned over, patting his arm. Bless you for trying. Sweetheart. In the back of the room, Evelyn stood silently, her arms crossed over her chest, watching. She hadn't expected to see him today. After everything, after the cafe, after the envelope, she'd half convinced herself he'd taken the next train back to New York. But there he was, fumbling with icons, laughing with grandmothers, and accepting corrections with humility. Mason, stacking books near the hallway, paused and tilted his head toward her. He's not trying to be impressive anymore. He said, just present. Evelyn didn't answer, but her gaze didn't move from Grant. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the last light clicked off at the center, Evelyn walked up her porch steps to find a card resting beneath the cushion of the rocking chair she'd refinished herself. Last spring. It wasn't sealed, just folded once. Let me earn a place beside you. G. No pressure, no questions, just those 8 words, the next evening. As the sun dipped below the bare trees, Grant returned. He wore a flannel jacket that looked slightly too soft for a man who once lived in pressed suits. His hair was a bit tousled, hands tucked into the pockets of his jeans as he approached the porch. Evelyn saw him from the window. She didn't open the door right away. He sat down on the swing, slow and quiet, the chains creaking just a little. He didn't knock, didn't call out, just waited, rocking gently back and forth. After a few minutes, the front door creaked open. Evelyn stepped out, holding a folded blanket and something wrapped in a napkin. She sat beside him, laying the blanket over both their laps. The cold settled around them, but the silence felt different this time shared, not separate. No words passed between them. Then, gently, she handed him half of a banana bread slice. Still warm from the oven, he smiled. The quiet woman, the cold-hearted CEO, and a town that watched both thaw together. Thanksgiving afternoon painted Ashwell in golden light. At the community center, hand-painted signs hung slightly askew above folding tables dressed in gingham cloth. Inside, warmth radiated not just from the crackling fireplace near the reading nook, but from the laughter, the shared spoons, the music humming softly from an old stereo in the corner. The potluck table sagged slightly under the weight of generosity. There was green bean casserole in a chipped blue dish, pumpkin chiffon pie set beside a bowl of fresh whipped cream, and buttered rolls wrapped in a red cloth napkin to keep warm. Someone had brought a spiral ham, someone else, a sweet potato bake, topped with little marshmallows already melting. Grant stood beside Rosa near the cider table, holding 2 mismatched mugs. He was grinning, an expression that, weeks ago, seemed foreign on his face. Now it fit easily. Evelyn crossed the room toward him, hair pulled gently back, cheeks slightly pink from the heat of the kitchen. When he handed her the mug, their fingers touched without hesitation. I think I've had 4 different kinds of stuffing, he said, mock whispering. 2 of them might have had raisins. Sounds risky, she replied, smiling. Rosa chuckled beside them. Eat first. Ask later. Mason passed by with a tray of cornbread and winked at Evelyn. You seeing this? He's practically one of us now. At some point, someone dimmed the overhead lights. The room glowed instead, from paper lanterns strung across the ceiling and candles nestled inside mason jars on each table. Evelyn moved to the front of the room, gently tapping a spoon against her glass. Conversation softened. The room stilled, but warmly. I never planned to speak, she began, her voice calm but strong. But I've been thinking. This place, it only works because people give not just food or money, but time, forgiveness, space. She paused, looking at Rosa, then at Clara near the back. It's not about what you hide, she said. It's what you give. The room held its breath. Then Clara stood, hands trembling slightly as she clutched the back of her chair. Her scarf was wrapped tightly, her eyes glassy. I judged wrong, she said, voice quiet but clear. I saw silence and thought it meant something. It didn't. Evelyn gave more than any of us. A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Evelyn nodded once, not tearful, but deeply moved, later. While reaching for a second helping of rolls, Grant tipped his cider, spilling a splash across his shirt. He cursed under his breath. But Evelyn was already beside him with a napkin, dabbing at the fabric, laughing softly. "Oh no, you're one of us now," she teased. "We all spill things on holidays." The whole table chuckled. Rosa raised her mug. "Welcome home." Then, someone snapped a Polaroid just then, Grant and Evelyn under string lights. His shirt stained. Her laughter caught mid-smile. Outside. As they walked home beneath the stars, their footsteps crunching softly over fallen leaves, Evelyn slid her gloved hand into his. "You ever thought about staying?" she asked. Barely above a whisper. Grant looked at her. Eyes kind. "Only every day since I got here." In the soft light of Thanksgiving, a quiet woman and a weary man found something neither of them had expected: belonging. Without grand gestures or perfect pasts, they built trust one small kindness at a time. Sometimes, the people we overlook are the ones holding the warmest lanterns in life's coldest seasons. True compassion doesn't need to be loud to be lasting, it just needs to be honest. If this story stirred something in you, perhaps consider offering a seat beside you to someone who's been sitting alone in silence. Thank you so much for spending your time with this story. If it touched something in your heart, we'd be truly grateful if you gave it a like, shared it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to our channel for more quiet stories that speak loudly to the soul. Your support helps kindness travel just a little bit farther.